Yeah.
Your beach may actually just be like old, crushed up stories.
Yeah, it could be.
You don't know.
Yeah.
I'm never going to the beach again.
Ruined it for me. This claim that there had been a previous form of written Greek, which is what the priests are saying, was news, obviously, to Solon. And also the claim that there had been a previous Greek civilization was also kind of news to him. It turns out the Egyptians, at that time at least, had better records on Greek history than the Greeks had themselves.
Because they weren't getting wiped out.
They weren't getting wiped out, yeah. And they also had a high regard for the Athenians. They decided to tell Solon the story of the greatest thing that Athens had ever done. And this was pre-Dark Ages, obviously. And so the great thing is way back in the day, again, either 9600 BC or 1500 BC, the civilizations of the Eastern Mediterranean came under attack by a mysterious sea people. So that was Athens and Egypt, among others, were essentially, the sea people were trying to conquer them and enslave them. And apparently they already controlled the Western Mediterranean, these sea people. And these invading armies wanted the control of the kings of Atlantis, and which the Egyptians described as a great island located outside the Pillars of Heracles. Or, depending, apparently Greek...
Could be Gibraltar, right?
Yeah, the Pillars of Heracles, they most likely was Gibraltar, but we don't really know 100% for sure about that. And also, it's possible, depending, because of language and everything like that, it's possible that it was just inside. I mean, typically, it's said to be outside the Straits of Gibraltar. Yeah, but it could have been inside. And also, as I said, there's other places that are nominees for the Pillars of Heracles also. So maybe it wasn't even Gibraltar.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, according to the writings, it kind of moved around a lot.
Yeah, it did, yeah.
Which is weird.
Yeah. It seems like the designation of Pillars of Heracles was just whatever the limits of navigation were.
Yeah, however far you could get. We've reached the pillars.
Yeah, we've reached the pillars. We can't go past the pillars.
Can't go past those.
Yeah.
Hey, so I totally went by them, so we're going to call that the pillars now.
Yeah.
So they're out there somewhere.
Yeah,
that couldn't have possibly been the pillars.
Yeah.
Nope.
No pillars. Yeah, so what else do we know about Atlantis? Let's see here. So Athens went to war and single-handedly defeated Atlantis and spared everybody from enslavement. So, happy ending and all that.
Yay!
Yeah. But then afterwards, there were violent earthquakes and floods in Athens, and in a single day and night, and I'll quote here from the Timaeus, the Athenians sank into the earth, and the island of Atlantis in like manner disappeared in the depths of the sea. For which reason the sea in those parts is impassable and impenetrable, because there is a shoal of mud in the way, and this is caused by the subsidence of the island, unquote.
Boo.
Yeah, so that's a head scratcher there. I'm not sure where these shoals of mud were. Maybe they've gotten washed away since. I don't know. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been over 1,000 years at least.
Maybe more.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Way
several
more.
thousand years.
Yeah.
If this is true.
Yeah, it's been a long time. And I should note that after Critias tells his tale of Atlantis, Plato, putting words in Socrates' mouth, or Socrates' mouth, assures the reader that the story is true. Yeah. And so that was the Timaeus. The next dialogue where he mentions it is the Critias, where he again recounts the story told to the Egyptians, or by the Egyptians, to Solon. But this time Critias talks about Athens and Atlantis in a lot greater detail. So prior to the great disaster that wiped out Greek civilization, the Acropolis in Athens, that place where the Parthenon is and all that? Yeah, that big old hill. It was larger, but apparently a single night of earthquakes and inundation washed away a lot of it. And prior to that disaster, the warrior class of Athens lived off by themselves on the north side of the hill, where they had dwellings, dining halls, and stuff like that. And there was a fountain or a spring which supplied all their needs for water, but that earthquake choked it off, and it was no more.
Filled it with debris.
Yeah. I'm leaving out a lot of detail here, but you can all go read the Critias also if you're interested.
It's totally on the internet.
Yeah, but do remember the spring. Yeah, remember that spring. Yeah.
Remember it.
That's a brief description of Athens way back in the day, prehistory, pre-Dark Ages.
And that's in the Critias?
Yeah. And then the description of Atlantis is very detailed. Yeah, and in fact, it's so detailed, I'm going to leave a lot of it out.
But you luckily for us, you formatted this in some bullet points, so
yeah.
it's easy to digest.
Yeah, there's little bits, little nuggets of information. Yeah. So what do we know? What we know about Atlantis is it was created by Poseidon. That's the god Poseidon.
The god of the sea.
Yeah, and he created it for, he's fallen in love with this woman named Cleito, and so he wanted to make a special island where she could be kind of isolated, so other guys couldn't.
Because he was
get on.
jealous.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, he was a Greek god. I mean,
They always were.
they were very jealous.
Yeah, they were. Yeah. So he creates this island. The island was about 5 stades across. And a stade is, it varies. It generally is named after a stadium. So it's the length of a stadium. And stadiums, of course, varied in sizes. And so a stade could be 500 feet, 600 feet, 700 feet. So I picked the average, which is about 600 feet.
Okay.
So that's 180 meters?
Yeah, around there.
Okay.
Yeah. And then he cut one circular channel, which filled with water. And that was 1 stade wide.
Is this radiating from the center of the island? Is that where all of these numbers come from? As we start in the center of an island and then go out a stade?
Yeah.
And then there's a ring cut?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Make sure it wasn't
So
working
like,
its way in.
Yeah, it's like a target. It's a bullseye. So the island's in the middle.
And that's 500 stades wide, or
No,
5 stades wide.
yeah.
Okay.
And then it's surrounded by a ring of water that's 1 stade wide. And then that ring of water is in turn surrounded by a ring of land that's 2 stades wide, which is surrounded by a ring of water that is 2 stades wide, which is surrounded by
Another piece of land.
Another piece of land, yeah. And I know, it's confusing. It's so much easier to just look at a diagram of it.
Yeah. And the third ring is 3 stades.
3
long.
stades, and the outer ring of water is 3 stades wide.
And then there's a wall.
Yeah, and then beyond that, there is a wall. The wall surrounded the entire thing. Also circular, about 6 miles out from the outermost ring of water, which I did a little math. And if the wall really did completely encircle the city, that'd be 47 miles long.
It's a big wall.
That's a long wall, yeah. I mean, the ancient Greeks were good with stonework. They could build walls fast. So maybe, it could be. Oh, of course, these weren't the Greeks. What am I saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, but people back in those days dealt with stone easily. And then a channel was cut.
They were all connected.
They were all connected to the sea. So
Through a
obviously-
channel.
Yeah, so apparently Atlantis was at sea level. That kind of makes sense, right? And then between the outer wall, or between the outer water ring and the wall, that was the commercial section of the city, apparently densely populated. And then bridges were built over the channels so that, if you were on one of those rings of land and you're on one side of the channel, you want to get to the other side, you don't have to go all the way around. You can just go over the bridge.
But that's what bridges are for.
Yeah, I know. So that was convenient. And then on the central island, the kings of Atlantis built a huge palace for themselves and also a temple of Poseidon and Cleito, and the Grove of Poseidon, which is also apparently really cool. It had lots of nifty trees. It also had hot and cold springs installed by Poseidon.
Because he was a plumber.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. And then most of the buildings were and walls and everything were built of a stone that was red, white, and black. So that's a detail you need to remember.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
So I never really got a clear impression of this. Is it there were red stones, there were white stones, and there were black stones, or is it more kind of like granite where it's modeled from reds to blacks to whites? Do you know?
I'd never seen a picture of this legendary rock.
Well, no,
I
but I'm just
understand
like in the descriptions. Sometimes people were like, it was this, and this, or it was this, that, and this, and I never really found out a whole lot about the rock. So I'm sure.
It's all 3 colors. My understanding is all 3 colors in one rock.
Okay,
Yeah,
so it's a
sort of like
multicolored stone.
multicolored rock.
Got it.
Yeah. Adjacent to the city, there was an oblong plain that was 2,000 by 3,000 stades, which is 230 by 340 miles. For those of you who are mired in the old-fashioned meter system, it's 370 by 550 kilometers. There was a channel cut all the way around the plain for irrigation, which was crisscrossed by other channels that were spaced 100 stades apart. And then to the north, there were huge mountains. Water would flow out of the mountains and flow into those irrigation channels. And so, good for agriculture.
Yeah.
And just a few other things about Atlantis. It had large deposits of orichalcum. I think that's how that's pronounced.
I think that's right.
Yeah, which is described as a metal more precious than anything but gold. But nobody knows what it is. There have been, besides Plato, there have been some other places in ancient manuscripts where they found mention of this metal, but nobody knows precisely what it is.
It's latinum.
Yeah, it could be. It could be copper too. I don't know. But,
Could be a lot of things.
yeah. Last of all, give a brief mention to the elephants. Yes, there were elephants in Atlantis, and so, but I don't want to talk about that too much.
I know that the description sometimes is a little hard to follow, but there are drawings, illustrations based off of this. Totally check them out. It makes a lot of sense once you look at that. But the bullseye is essentially what the whole thing was.
Yeah.
A giant dartboard.
Yeah, just a big old God's dartboard. And eventually it became one. Yeah.
Oh, wait,
Yeah.
that's what's last.
Anyway, if you are interested in reading more details, the Critias is actually online. You can just do a Google on it, you'll find it out there. So
Yeah.
yeah, so
As
easy to find.
mentioned, yeah.
Yeah.
All of these historic works are.
Yeah, pretty
Yeah.
much. Yeah, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, life in Atlantis was pretty good for a long time because there were these people who were kind of descended from the gods because Poseidon mated with his woman and they had like 5 sets of twins and who became kings of Atlantis, and so these people were all sort of had god blood in them and everything, but then how the story goes, generation after generation, that blood gets thinned out a little bit more.
Well, didn't they also, I swear I remember something about they kept subdividing the island for the next generation to have their own to own. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So the next generation from those 5 sets of twins got parts of the island and it just sort of got overpopulated.
Yeah, that's why they had to take the sea and go out and conquer other land.
Gentrification, totally.
Yeah, I know. But as is typical in these stories, the Atlanteans lost their way, became more consumed with greed and lust for power, and yada. These stories.
Warlike.
Yeah, more warlike. And Zeus decided they needed to be punished so that they could see the errors of their ways.
What? Zeus
Yeah.
decided people needed to be punished?
Zeus.
He never does that.
Never.
He's a
Yeah,
kitten.
never,
Yeah.
I know. So we're still in the Critias. He calls all the gods together for a confab. Just as he was about to speak, the story ends.
Huh?
The last sentence reads, and I will quote, "And when he had called them together, he spake as follows," unquote. Not even a period.
That's the first cliffhanger right
Yeah,
there.
That is a cliffhanger.
It's a good one, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if some pages got lost, or if Plato died, or if he got arrested. I'm
No,
not sure.
Plato invented the cliffhanger.
Maybe
Yeah.
that was it. Yeah.
He was doing an intentional thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
He
we-
invented the cave, didn't he?
Yeah, there was the cave. Yeah. Did you read the Republic?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm mostly making fun of things.
Yeah. The cave. Well, that's a mystery, but we'll tackle that another time. So that's the whole thing. I mean, the mystery of Atlantis. Was it true? So it's kind of an either-or kind of thing.
Yes or no?
Yeah, yes or no? Is it true or not? What do you guys think? There are people out there that say Plato made it all up. It wouldn't be the first time he invented some sort of
Allegory.
It's an allegory.
Yeah.
I think it's an allegory.
Yeah, although the problem with this as an allegory is it's kind of hard. It's not really clear what point he's trying to make with this story.
Well, the
Whereas
point
with
is,
the cave,
the point comes after, and when he called them all together, he spake as follows.
Mhm.
That's the next part of that, right? That's when it brings it all together, and you go, oh yeah, that's what the allegory was all about. You just never finished it.
It was the 17th book in the Wheel of Time series that tied it all together,
that
but it
did.
never got written.
Yeah, that must be
Yes,
it.
it did.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know.
yeah.
But no, I personally feel like it's got to be an allegory, and he was just drawing on references that he knew. I mean, he did things like that in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'd done it. Like I said, there's a cave in the Republic, but when he told the story of the cave, he makes it very clear that
That
this
it's an
is
allegory.
not real.
Yeah.
He makes it very, very clear that it's an analogy, and it is to illustrate a very basic point about philosophy and reality and the way ordinary people who are not philosophers see the world compared to how philosophers see the world. I mean, so
Yeah.
that's what the analogy.
Spoilers, philosophers are better in every way.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
But here's the thing: is that when we think of the writings of really famous people that are considered to be master works, we never see, or very rarely see, the contemporary critique that they received when they first put it out there. You don't see that they were getting heckled and everybody was like, you shouldn't have done this, that was so terrible. And it's not till 100 or 1,000 years later, people are like, oh my gosh, this is really great. And the critiques, which were mostly verbal, never got recorded. So it could very well be that when he did this, I'm making this up, I'm telling you now I made this up, everybody was like, that was so dumb. That was the worst part of that story. Why did you do that? So he's like, okay, I won't do it again. It's totally real this time.
Okay.
I mean, it's possible.
Yeah. Well, definitely, I would have to agree that he or somebody had to have embellished the story just a little bit, because the idea of this island surrounded by these canals and everything like that, I mean, they were huge, and so obviously it would have had to have been some sort of a natural formation.
Because men
Or
couldn't have...
Poseidon.
We didn't have Yeah, or Poseidon.
Yeah,
But-
men couldn't have dug that.
No.
Aliens could have.
Aliens could have?
Yes.
That's possible. Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Just saying. The
Yeah.
ancient
It could be
aliens.
an alien charging station, and we
It
didn't
could
know
have.
it.
Yeah.
It could have actually just been like, the landing spot.
Mm-hmm.
The outline is the outline of the spaceship. We figured it out, guys.
Yeah.
We can finish that,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, and if there was one detail that Plato made up, it was probably the rings because he loves circles.
Mm-hmm.
He was into geometry and all that stuff, and yeah, he likes circles a lot.
Yeah.
So, well, the other possibility is that he didn't make it up.
Yeah, and frankly, like, if he didn't make it up, then what happened to Atlantis, right?
I know.
Where is it?
I know.
That's the next question, right?
That is the next question. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, here's what I think is evidence that he didn't make it up.
That it was the truth.
Yeah.
Okay.
The truth, at least partially the truth. Well, again,
Based in truth.
yeah. Well, remember the spring on the Acropolis that was
Yeah.
choked up?
Yeah.
Yeah, that didn't exist in Plato's day.
Well, okay, so how does that prove?
Well, yeah, because an archaeological expedition uncovered that same spring in the 1930s.
Oh, so it did exist at one time,
Yeah.
but not when Plato was around.
Yeah, it existed. It existed many, many years before, and then they went into the Dark Ages. All writing was lost, and then Solon goes to Egypt, and the Egyptians tell him about the spring that existed. Nobody knew that it existed then.
Is it actually documented that the spring didn't exist when Plato was writing?
As far as I know, it was found in the 1930s.
Okay.
There was not a spring there.
Well, I think what Devin's getting at was there mentions of it in other writings.
Yeah, I
where
mean,
you were heading?
I guess the question is like, it'd be pretty easy for him to say, oh yeah, and then this spring got covered up, even though it was still there, and then it got covered up in the interim, and then it was rediscovered.
Oh yeah, no, I don't think it was still there.
Yeah.
Because the way
Okay,
the way he told the story is there was a spring, but it
Yeah.
was choked off.
Yeah, and I
Not
guess he's
there
telling
anymore.
people in Athens, and they would probably go. They'd be like, wait, no, that spring's there. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
But this story is totally true.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good point.
So, okay, so
So that's interesting.
That's a detail the Egyptians told Solon that he couldn't have known himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is there could have been, even after they went into the Dark Ages, there could have been stories that were passed down from generation to generation, even without writing.
Verbal
Oh, there always
history.
are.
Yeah, but if you're going to tell a story, you're going to tell a story of like guts and glory and stuff like that. You're not going to talk about the spring on top of the Acropolis, probably.
Yeah, old men sit around and just talk about stuff over and over.
You might, yeah, especially if you were part of the warrior class and you had lived over there and you're sitting there and say, man, you remember how great it was when we had that spring? That was awesome. That was
think-
so sweet. That was high living.
Generation
Yeah.
later, you remember that story Grandpa used to tell
About the
about the
spring.
spring?
That was the most boring story
Yeah,
ever.
that was the dumbest thing.
Yeah, I think the warrior class all got wiped out.
Yeah.
It was all the sheep herders up in the hills
Mm-hmm.
who survived. Another clue. A lot of clay tablets have been found in Greek ruins that were inscribed with an obscure non-Greek language. Turns out, though, that these date back to before the Greek Dark Ages, and the language has been named Linear B, and it appears that is an earlier form of written Greek.
So there's linear A and linear B.
Yeah.
Which one has been deciphered? I want to say it's A, but
yeah.
I'm not sure.
I thought they had both been deciphered, and they weren't.
No, I think only one of them have been deciphered, and they're I can't remember. They're both related to each other. It's been a long time since I've read about linear A and B. Last time I read about it was, what was that? The Code Breaker. Remember that book?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the last time I read about linear A and B.
Linear
Okay.
B has been deciphered.
Okay, so it's A that has not.
I mean, I can.
It's not important to the story. I just suddenly couldn't remember.
I know it's hard to keep track of that stuff, but so this is another interesting detail. I mean, this stuff was buried, long ago in ancient ruins, and there was no way that Plato knew that there had been a previous form of written Greek, and yet the Egyptians knew. So that's another interesting clue. And another thing is the story itself. At the ending, it's kind of a downer ending because Atlantis gets their just comeuppance in the story, which is the way these things are
Because
supposed to work.
Athens beats them.
But yeah,
But Athens gets it too, right?
Athens gets it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although I guess that does lead a lot of credence to the fact that it was real, because natural disasters like a huge earthquake or a tsunami or something like that, if it's a sea people that's coming, it's likely that if it's an earthquake that big, it would probably destroy other places like Athens, right? So that's, but
Yeah.
maybe not Egypt because it's
That's
Too
further
far away.
Yeah. And
different
so,
plate.
Yeah, I think that when you're telling a parable, if you're trying to illustrate a point, then you want to have the good guys live happily ever after.
Yeah.
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 Unless the point is it doesn't matter what you do. If you engage in war, you're screwed.
Life is random, and even if you try to do good, you're going to get smitten by the gods, or smited by the gods.
Yeah. I like smitten.
Smitten? Yeah. Yeah, I'd rather have the gods smitten with me than smiting me.
Well,
that's what
the chances are pretty good
that's
that
how
a god
Atlantis
would be
was made.
with you.
Yeah. Any gods out there listening? Hey.
Hey, sup?
Yeah, dude. My last point is that the story has Plato's ancestor, Solon, relating this information. And also Socrates assures the reader that the story is true. And Socrates, of course, as we know, was Plato's mentor, highly respected by Plato. And I wouldn't it be kind of disrespectful to Solon and Socrates, to put lies in their mouths? So for a little expert on this issue, we're going to talk to Mark Adams, guys. And I'm sure all of you heard of Mark, but for the few of you that haven't, he's written a book called Meet Me in Atlantis, which came out a year or two ago. I'm not sure when it came out.
About a year ago.
Yeah. Which is a really good source if you want to learn more about Atlantis, because, obviously...
Who doesn't?
Yeah, and he goes into it in a lot more detail, so if you're interested in that. I would like to point out, before we talk to Mark, that he is actually a nonfiction writer. He used to work for Outside Magazine. He's written another book called Turn Right at Machu Picchu.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I just finished. Good book. But he's a nonfiction writer. He's not a crank. He's very skeptical of all this stuff. But
it was great to talk to him.
Yeah, no, it was. Yeah. So as to the question of whether it would be disrespectful to Solon and Socrates, we put that question to Mark Adams.
It might have been, but again, I don't want to go back into my post-structuralist terminology that drove me out of grad school in the early 90s. But he's using a series of masks here. He could be hiding behind Socrates to say something that he wants to play with. So we can't know whether he intended that to be real or whether he was using that as some sort of rhetorical device or whatnot. So if we knew for a fact that this was intended as a piece of written history, yes, it would have been disrespectful for him to put those words in the mouth of Socrates or into the mouth of Solon, but that's another thing that we have to deal with here, another layer, which is that written history in 360 BCE, this is still new technology. This is, as far as the Greeks are concerned, this is technology that's less than 100 years old. Herodotus has the father of history, has just started doing this stuff about 100 years before, and writing down history rather than allowing it to be passed on orally. And when history is passed on orally, it's done in the form of stories, which become myths. So now, from our vantage point, we have to decode those myths and try to pluck the truth out. And this is a lot of what archaeologists and anthropologists do. So Plato, through the character of Socrates, wrestling with this idea. Is written history true, or is oral history true? Things that are passed down as stories true. And I think it's in the Republic, or no, it's actually in a different word, but I can't remember which. Socrates comes out and says, look, I actually trust oral history more. I trust things that are passed down not in writing, because you can engage with them, you can argue with them. Whereas written history is just sort of this lump right here, and you can't sort of poke the holes in it. It is what it is. So that's just one more gigantic problem sitting in the middle of the attempt to try to solve the Atlantis story.
All right, so that's my whole thing, and those four things: the spring, the tablets. It turned out the written alphabet that was lost, the unhappy ending for Athens, which makes no sense, and also the respect issue. This makes me think that probably this was a true story.
Okay.
At least in Plato's eyes.
Or at least that maybe Solon was told that story.
By the Egyptians, yeah.
Whether they were pulling the wool over his eyes.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's possible. The thing about it is they knew stuff that was true.
Yeah, that's true. Good point.
Yeah. And the idea of a city disappearing is not totally crazy. There was an ancient Greek city of Helike, which was wiped out by an earthquake and a tsunami. Have you heard of those guys? Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole thing was wound up underwater, and then permanently underwater. Apparently, got smeared with the between the earthquake and the tsunami, the ground under the city basically subsided, and it wound up in the water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It did sink entirely.
It really did. That was the city. Of course, that was not Atlantis, but these things could happen. Although some people have theorized that Helike was Atlantis, but total wrong timeline.
Yeah.
So it's
Wrong.
not Helike.
That was what, 300 and something BC was Helike?
It was right around Plato's time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some people have suggested that this might have been an inspiration for the story of Atlantis.
Mm-hmm.
That has been suggested. Although if Helike was wiped out, well, Athens did not get wiped out with that particular earthquake and tsunami, so that's why it's not a great Atlantis candidate, or for that and other reasons.
Well, that's again saying that. I mean, you're saying that under the guise of the story is true, is why you're saying it that way, correct?
Is that
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm just saying that it's not outrageous, the idea that this city could totally be submerged.
It's also entirely possible that, I think we said this before, he's picking and choosing things that happened in history and using them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another place that used to be considered just be a fable was the lost city of Troy. That eventually was found. Yeah. It used to be thought of just something made up by Homer, but it's actually there. It's in Turkey.
But it's not 100% that's actually Troy, right? We just think it's Troy.
It's pretty widely accepted,
Right.
but it's not absolutely 100%. Yeah. And actually, I should point out too that archaeology is a relatively new science. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that they probably have gotten wrong. Not to diss any of our archaeological listeners.
No.
Yeah.
They know.
They're making educated guesses.
Yeah.
Based on information that they've deduced previously.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I'm sure they're getting a lot of it right, but probably not all of it. But hey, we just got to keep digging.
So we're pretty much saying that Atlantis was real.
I think that with a certain degree of fudgy factoriness. Yeah.
Fudge factory.
A little fudge factory in there.
We gotta go to the fudge factory.
Yeah. Honestly, that sounds really good.
Yeah, I don't like fun.
Let's just pause this.
Yeah.
We'll go do that and we'll be
We'll
back.
take a break. Okay.
We're back.
You two have so much chocolate on your faces.
It's fine. It's gonna amp us up for the rest of the episode.
Is that? Oh, okay. Okay.
The rest of this will be a lot more high energy.
Yeah.
I didn't think
you have
Joe's
enough.
mustache could get any bigger, but
As my mother would say, it's like a child with a beard eating.
Atlantis was probably actually not called Atlantis. It could have been called Tartessos or something else. There was an ancient city called Tartessos, by the way.
there was.
Yeah. Whether the story was completely accurate in all the details, I'm sure it was not. The priest might have been misinformed about some details. And then, of course, the story was passed down for 200 years in the intergenerational game of telephone. Because there's got to be some distortions, added in
Absolutely.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's, translation nuances as well.
There's also that, Egyptian to Greek and all that. Plato himself.
Well, and Greek to English.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Greek to English too. Yeah. Plato might have embellished the story a bit himself. So he was trying to describe an ideal society. So if there were some messy little details, he might have left some of those out. And he might have stuck some stuff in there just to make his point.
People tend to embellish.
Yeah, that does happen.
It's an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't do it at all, ever.
Oh, no.
But it's pretty easy to do.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's about the story. There probably really was an Atlantis.
So story over, right? We're done?
Well, no, now we have to find it. Now that we know it existed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the point where I tell you guys I get seasick. So I'm probably not the one to take on this expedition.
Yeah. That's okay. We'll bring somebody else.
Okay.
Yeah, Devin and me and some other guy.
Here's what I know about
Indiana
getting
Jones.
seasick. You get over it after a couple days.
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. That's good to know. I never
When
experienced
you pick my
that.
stunt double, make sure he's got good hair.
Yeah.
That's all I ask.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey,
Okay.
I tell you, it is funny when you go to an ocean thing and you're feeling fine and there's people with the side just heaving their guts out. It's like, it makes me feel good.
Yeah, me too. I like
up.
watching other people suffer.
Yeah.
Shut up.
So where do we start looking for Atlantis?
Yeah, I checked the Atlantopedia. Have you seen the Atlantopedia?
No,
Holy
never.
crap.
Yeah. This is the creation of an Irish guy named Tony O'Connell. He has a few lists of all the different places that have been put forward as possible locations for Atlantis, and there
Like
are
almost every place in the entire world has been offered up.
I didn't even count all the places that were on the list, much less check them all out.
No.
Yeah, and there were hundreds of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots and lots of places. And by the way, Tony O'Connell is another guy who's not a crank or a crackpot. fact, Mark talks about him in his book, and he actually met up with him in Ireland and then later on in Malta. And he seems to have an admirable bit of skepticism. So.
Yeah, no, he understands that when somebody says Atlantis was actually in the Blue Ridge Mountains on the continental United States, he's probably not accurate.
Yeah. But he'll probably add it anyway.
He'll put it on there.
He'll add it in because it's the Atlantopedia. Everything goes in there that's Atlantis related. And yeah, so definitely worth checking out. We'll post a link to that. Or if you just want to go to Google to find the Atlantopedia, just type in Atlantopedia. And there it is.
There you go.
It'll come right up. And boy, there's a lot of good information there. There's